Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Love. It's extolled in song, in philosophy, and by most people as core to the life well led. On the other hand, love implies a measure of irrationality, caring more about a person than rational analysis would dictate. For example, amplifying their positives while downplaying their negatives. Should we venerate such irrationality? After all, so many people fall in love only to break up and be bereft, often bereft for a long time. Is Tennyson right that it's better to have loved and lost than not to have loved at all? But averages don't count here. I'm talking to you. What do you think is right for you? Should love and traditionally defined deep love be your goal? What's your potential to love? As with most human characteristics, people tend to vary in how deeply they can love. I've seen people who ever put their romantic partner above themselves, even are willing to donate a kidney. On the other extreme, some people's love is pretty much limited to being an activity partner. The question is, even if you wanted to change, how malleable are you? Maybe it's just a matter of finding someone who you can feel deep love for, or maybe an attitude change will help. Maybe you need to first heal some past trauma you've experienced. So, what do you think would be wise for you in terms of how much you should search for or expect to be deeply loving or expect deep loving from a partner? Now let's talk about boundaries. Should we make our loved one priority one, job one? What level of sacrifice should we agree to incur? It can be as little as saying, you know what, I'm going to listen when I don't feel like listening. Or a little bigger, giving them a pass on their mistakes. Or at the other extreme, as I mentioned earlier, giving the aforementioned kidney. Where do you want to be on that continuum? Now let's turn to love's transience, the transience of love. Some of the world's great luminaries have long lamented the short life, or I should say life or half-life at least, of love. No less than Shakespeare wrote, "Come kiss me, sweet and 20, youth's a stuff will never endure." Edna St. Vincent Millay, the poet, concurred. She wrote, "I would indeed that love were longer lived, and vows were not so brittle." Less lofty, there was a songwriter way back in 1909, his name is Jimmy Lucas, who wrote, "I love my wife, but oh, you kid." Some couples seem to not only maintain love, but deepen love throughout their lifetime. Alas, other people don't. The question is for you. Do you sense that infatuations fade, the fade that tends to happen with infatuation, is a biological imperative, maybe an imperative that's solidified by your previous relationships? If you think that's the case with you, is it wise to focus on acceptance of that and just savor the good moments while we can, in the same way as we might appreciate a rose's beauty more because its perfection is transient? Or do you feel you have a shot at lifetime love by using, for example, good communication skills, date nights, and balancing giving with taking so you don't just feel you're a doormat? Now let's talk about asymmetries. Every relationship has some measure of asymmetry where one person has got more of something than the other. For example, one partner is kinder, more likely to look for the good in you and not to exert excessive retribution in response to your mistakes. Or one partner is thriftier, careful to spend cost-effectively and to splurge only rarely. Or where one partner is more responsible, prioritizing what's important. Or one partner is lower maintenance, quite judicious in deciding when to let an annoyance slide and when it's worth complaining and or asking for support or help. Or one partner is more addiction resistant, not prone to excess. One more example. One partner is more ethical, in most circumstances doing the right thing, even when it is to his or her detriment. So what might you do when a relationship asymmetry troubles you, but you don't want to exit the relationship? Well, here are some options. You might, of course, ignore it. You might decide that trying to reduce the asymmetry is unlikely to work well enough and would unduly strain the relationship. For example, let's say your partner is more laid back than you are, and so doesn't get as much done as you would like. You could decide that this person is unlikely to change significantly, so you decide to accept that asymmetry as just one of the relationship's liabilities. Every relationship has liabilities. Or instead of ignoring it, you could decide to analyze causation. Before jumping to solutions, sometimes it's wise to look for what's causing the problem. For example, let's say your live-in partner is messy. It might be worth asking your partner something like, why do you think you're more comfortable with the house being less neat than I am? The answer could vary from, well, appearance just isn't that important, to, my parents are neat freaks and tried to turn me into one. Your partner's answer to that question about why are you more comfortable with a house being less neat than I am, could improve your understanding of the problem or even subtly encourage your partner to decide to change. Let's say you don't want to, or you don't want to ignore it. You either have or haven't analyzed causation, but you might then want to propose a trade. To take the previous example, you might say something like, I know we both want the relationship to improve, so maybe each of us might take a baby step. You wish I were cleaner around the house, and I wish you were less of a spender. So, what do you think of our trying a little experiment? For the next day, I'll try to be as careful as you'd like me to be about keeping the house clean. And you will take a look at our credit card bill to see if there's a way to cut spending that you could live with. Finally, you could be a little more assertive and demand change. Instead of just ignoring or looking for causation or proposing a trade, you could, sometimes people are just motivated by a clear, direct message, even a message that's accompanied by a threat. For example, I am having a really hard time with your substance abuse. I've tried to be supportive. I've even occasionally joined you in it, but that's not serving me, and I deeply believe is not serving you. You've tried cutting down, but that hasn't worked. You're using as much as ever. I can't take it anymore. Either you stop now, or although I love you, I have to leave. So, yeah, it's true that sometimes a troubling relationship asymmetry is best addressed with some professional counselor or a trusted friend, but a number of my clients and friends said, okay, I, myself, have found that the aforementioned self-help tactics, whether it be ignoring or trying to find causation or proposing a trade or making a demand, work well enough. I'm going to take just a very brief break, 15, 20 seconds, whatever. And when I come back, I'm going to talk about 6 specific areas of relationship asymmetry, that is sexual asymmetry, career, neediness, other stuff, and offer my thoughts on that. And then I'm going to talk about other kinds of love, work, love of doggy, love of government, love of life. So anyway, I hope you'll stay with me. Okay, thank you for staying with me. As promised, we talked just before we're talking about love and the good stuff and the not such great stuff, and I always like to propose suggestions for improvement if it's possible. We were talking about relationship asymmetry, where there's, sexual imbalance between partners or career imbalance, one is more successful than the other, or neediness, they vary in neediness, such things like that. But I was offering generic advice before the break. Well, here I want to be specific. So, let's talk about disparate levels of sexual desire. To be really honest, only occasionally have my clients improved their sex life by following the standard advice like communicate your preferences, hang out in bed, plan date nights. Certainly you might try those. And I really encourage, if you're going to try whatever you're going to try, to use what I call an experimental, playful mindset. You try it, see if it works. If not, dump it. You're trying stuff out. This is not life or death. And sometimes, I want to be in fairness, sometimes a relationship counselor or even a sex therapist, even a sex surrogate can help. But, usually, anyway. So that's one way in which you can deal with asymmetry, sexual asymmetry. Now let's talk about career asymmetry. Let's say one partner has a more prestigious or lucrative job. that can trigger in the other partner resentment or defensiveness, even retribution. It may help to remember that career, while it's an important currency, is only one currency. Other valuable currencies include, for example, ethics, kindness, and diligent efforts on domestic matters, from parenting to marketing. Now let's turn to another common asymmetry, which is drive, work ethic, discipline, whatever you want to call it. Duty to the relationship, whatever, that kind of work thing. It may be realistic to expect only incremental improvement, and to that end, consider talking with your partner to identify one key area that the less work-oriented partner, the less productivity-oriented, the less responsible, dutiful, hard-working partner would try. Pick something important that he or she wouldn't find odious, at least for starters. Sometimes that's the way you build momentum. Another area of relationship asymmetry is in neediness. If you're asked to give disproportionately to your partner, is it realistic to try to change your mindset from resenting the imposition to finding some pleasure in giving? Now, whether or not that's realistic for you, do consider asking your partner if someone else might at least partly fill the need, like a friend of theirs that they can chat with, so that you're not the only person that they can process or talk with. Another and very often very painful form of relationship asymmetry is regarding materialism. One person might be much more of a spender and the other much more of a saver. So in that case, you might start by asking why you or your partner spends so much. Is it boredom? Is it trying to fill an emotional hole? Is it addiction to the evanescent shopper's high? If you get any such insight, whether or not you do or not, but might there be some room for compromise, like finding one category of spending that might be curtailed. For example, non-essential internet impulse buying. And as I mentioned earlier, it may help to review your credit card bill or your check register. And finally, a final area of often of disparate values, asymmetries in a relationship is religiosity. Billions of people find that religion adds meaning to their quotidian existence, that is, their day-to-day existence. And religion can be a balm against life's slings and arrows. A kind person, even if it's an atheist, wouldn't attempt to disabuse someone of their faith. If you're the less religious partner, before discussing the asymmetry, remind yourself to be respectful and not try to make your partner surrender their faith. Unless you think I'm some religious person who's got a pro-faith bias, I might mention I'm an atheist. This issue around religiosity can be especially challenging with kids. They're particularly vulnerable to being influenced when they're young. Should your child have religious training? Well, there's no black and white answer here. Only a suggestion that you both try to be statesmanlike. For example, you might say, you and I differ on religion's value. We could send our child to Sunday school, but allow me to balance its pro-religion message with my respectfully presenting my belief in secular humanism. Or we can forego Sunday school and you can share your religious and spiritual perspectives with our child. What do you think? Okay, so just to sum that little part of our discussion about asymmetries, all relationships have asymmetries, and attempting to resolve them and accepting the ones you can't resolve are key to making a relationship that isn't made in heaven work here on earth. I promised you also that I was going to talk briefly about some other sorts of love, because of course there are other sorts of love other than romantic. I'm not going to talk so much about parent love here or that other kind of familial love. I want to talk about perhaps less obvious sorts of love. I want to start with love of work. Khalil Gibran wrote, quote, "Work is love made visible," end quote. Should we not have room in our hearts and in our esteem for the person who works long hours to provide good hearth and home, even if their domestic involvement consists more of quality time than quantity time? Love of dog. Some people disparage dog lovers as disproportionately unable to sustain love with human beings. But love of dog and human aren't mutually exclusive, and some benefits of having a dog are difficult to duplicate with a person, like cuddling on demand. Enforced exercise. You got to take your dog out for, so he doesn't cross his legs or have an accident in the house. And, of course, the off-cited benefit of having a dog, unconditional love. There are some people who love, or at least like very much, government. George Orwell described the typical citizen in the world of 1984, his book 1984, quote, "He loved Big Brother," end quote. Some people venerate big government, feeling that the taxes and the restrictions on our freedoms are well worth it, if not for personal benefit, for the less fortunate. But other people are far less fond of government. And finally, the love of life. Benjamin Franklin wrote, "Dost thou love life? Then don't squander time. For that's the stuff life is made of," end quote. For those who do love life, that may be the greatest love of all. As with most things, when it comes to love, one size doesn't fit all. So in light of all of these ideas I've shared, do you want to jot down a thought or two about how you plan in your life to manifest love and deal with the challenges that it brings? In any event, I do thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, thank you very much for listening. I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments, and especially like it if you share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe, whether it be to my YouTube channel or my iTunes or my Spotify for these podcasts. And in any event, I do thank you for watching or listening. I am Marty Nemko. Oh yeah, I should tell you, I always like to end by saying these podcasts, and this I believe is more important than ever. We find comfort among those who agree with us, growth among those who don't.